The autumn wind whispered through the ancient trees of Medford Forest, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of approaching winter. Two cloaked figures moved silently through the undergrowth, their footsteps barely disturbing the carpet of fallen leaves. Royce Melbourne, with his characteristic dark hood and calculating demeanor, led the way while his partner, Hadrian Blackwater, followed with the casual confidence of a skilled swordsman. The moonlight filtered through the canopy, casting ethereal shadows that danced around them as they approached their meeting point. The job seemed simple enough. Meet a nobleman's messenger, receive instructions, get paid. But in their line of work, nothing was ever that simple. The clearing where they were to meet their contact was eerily silent, too silent. Royce's keen eyes spotted the messenger before Hadrian, a trembling young man in expensive but mud-stained clothes, clutching a sealed letter like it was his last lifeline. Count Pickering's messenger, Marcus, spoke in hurried whispers about a simple retrieval job at Medford Castle. 5,000 crowns for one night's work, far too much for something simple. Royce noticed the way Marcus's eyes darted to the shadows, the slight shake in his voice that spoke of more than just normal nervousness. When questioned about the details, Marcus's answers became increasingly vague, setting off warning bells in both thieves' minds. As they discussed terms, Royce caught a glimpse of movement in the tree line, the moonlight briefly illuminating a metal buckle where no buckle should be. He casually shifted his position, using hand signals to alert Hadrian to the presence of hidden observers. The messenger continued his rehearsed speech, unaware of the deadly dance beginning to unfold around him. Hadrian's hands casually drifted toward his sword hilts, while Royce's fingers found the reassuring touch of his daggers. The job was indeed too good to be true, but the real question was, who had set this trap, and why? As Marcus finished speaking, the sound of multiple bowstrings being drawn echoed through the clearing, and the true nature of their simple job began to reveal itself. The autumn wind whispered through the torch-lit streets of Medford as Royce and Hadrian approached the imposing gates of Count Pickering's castle. The nobleman had offered them a suspiciously generous sum for what seemed like a simple job, retrieving an old sword from his competitor's collection. The castle guards, clad in polished armor bearing the Pickering crest, eyed them with barely concealed disdain as they were escorted through winding corridors. Hadrian's warrior instincts tingled. Something felt off about the whole arrangement. The Count, a portly man with an overly enthusiastic smile, detailed their mission while servants poured dark red wine into silver goblets. Royce remained silent, his keen eyes scanning the room, noting every shadow, every subtle movement of the servants. The job seemed too easy, the payment too generous, but they had already accepted the contract. Under the cover of darkness, Royce and Hadrian infiltrated the rival castle with practiced ease. The sword they sought was supposedly displayed in the main hall, but upon reaching their destination, they found something far more sinister. The hall was empty, save for the lifeless body of King Amrath, his crown missing, blood pooling on the marble floor. Before they could process the scene, torches blazed to life around them, revealing dozens of royal guards emerging from hidden alcoves. Captain Aldrich, his armor gleaming in the sudden light, pointed his sword at the pair. "Assassins," he declared, his voice echoing through the hall. Hadrian's hand instinctively moved to his sword, but Royce knew better. They were hopelessly outnumbered, and worse, perfectly framed. The dungeons of Medford Castle were notorious for their security, and now Royce and Hadrian experienced it firsthand. Their cell was deep underground, where the air hung heavy with moisture and the distant screams of other prisoners echoed through stone corridors. Hadrian tested the chains binding his wrists while Royce sat quietly, his mind racing through possible escape routes. Their weapons had been confiscated, their reputation destroyed, and execution seemed inevitable. But then, in the darkest hour before dawn, soft footsteps approached their cell. A hooded figure emerged from the shadows. Princess Arista herself, her face pale in the torchlight. "I know you didn't kill my father," she whispered, her hands trembling as she gripped the cell bars. "And I can prove it. But first, I need your help." Before she could explain further, the sound of guard patrol echoed through the corridor, and she vanished into the darkness, leaving the two prisoners with a glimmer of hope and countless questions. The cold stone walls of Medford Castle's dungeon seemed to close in around Royce as he paced his cell, his dark cloak gathering dust from the grimy floor. The guards had been particularly careful with him, using their finest shackles, a detail that would have made him smile under different circumstances. The flickering torchlight cast dancing shadows across the walls, making the already claustrophobic space feel even more oppressive. His keen eyes constantly scanned for opportunities, cataloging every crack, every loose stone, every guard rotation. Then came the unexpected visitor, Princess Arista, her presence illuminating the dreary corridor like a torch in darkness. Her proposition was as dangerous as it was intriguing. Help her and earn not just freedom, but a royal pardon. In the privacy of a secluded chamber, Arista revealed her cards. Her brother, King Alric, was in grave danger. The church's influence grew stronger by the day, and whispers of conspiracy echoed through the castle halls. Hadrian, standing by the window, watched the princess with measured skepticism. The deal was simple, yet deadly. Break into the most secure prison in the realm, rescue a man who might hold the key to saving the kingdom, and do it all before dawn. As Arista spoke, her voice trembling with barely contained urgency, Royce noticed something in her eyes. Fear, yes, but also something else. Something she wasn't telling them. The plan took shape in whispered conversations and hurried meetings. Each detail Arista revealed only led to more questions. Why was this prisoner so important? What did the church want with him? Royce and Hadrian found themselves caught in a web of royal intrigue far more complex than simple theft. As they prepared for their mission, gathering information and supplies, a servant boy rushed into their chamber, face white as chalk. "The prisoner," he gasped. "They're moving him tonight." In that moment, the carefully laid plans crumbled. But it was what the boy said next that made even Royce's blood run cold. "And the church's Serit has just arrived at the castle gates." Time had just become their deadliest enemy. The moonless night wrapped around Royce like a familiar cloak as he studied Guttaria Prison's imposing silhouette. Ancient stone walls rose against the star-studded sky, their weathered surfaces telling tales of countless failed escape attempts. Beside him, Hadrian shifted uncomfortably, the warrior's usual confidence somewhat dimmed by the task ahead. Breaking into the kingdom's most secure prison wasn't just foolhardy, it was practically suicide. Yet here they were, about to attempt exactly that to save King Amrath. The gentle clink of Hadrian's sword harness nearly made Royce wince. "Remember," he whispered, "we're not here to fight. We're like ghosts tonight." A distant owl's cry punctuated his words, and somewhere within the fortress, a guard's torch created dancing shadows on the walls. The ancient sewers beneath Guttaria held secrets older than the prison itself. Royce led the way through the labyrinthine passages, his footsteps silent despite the shallow water beneath. The stench was almost unbearable. but it was their best chance of reaching the king undetected. Hadrian's muttered curses echoed softly as another rat scurried past his feet. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the faintest glimmer from Royce's carefully hooded lantern. They froze as voices drifted down from above, guards making their rounds. The sound of their boots on the stone floor created a perfect rhythm, until it didn't. "Someone's coming down," Royce hissed, extinguishing their light. The darkness that followed was complete, but the approaching footsteps were unmistakable. They weren't alone in the sewers anymore. Finding King Amrath's cell proved easier than expected, almost too easy. The monarch lay on a crude straw pallet, his once regal bearing diminished by weeks of imprisonment. As Royce worked on the lock, Hadrian kept watch, his trained ears alert for any approach. The king's eyes widened with recognition as the cell door swung open. But before he could speak, a bell began to toll somewhere above. "That's not the hour bell," Hadrian said, his hand moving to his sword. Royce's face darkened. "No, it's not." The sound of multiple boots on stone echoed through the corridors, growing louder by the second. They had walked into a trap. As torchlight began to flicker at the end of the corridor, Royce noticed something else, a symbol carved into the cell's wall that made his blood run cold. This was never about the king at all. The real game was only beginning.
Thank you for venturing into this realm with me. If you crave more enchanted worlds, mythical battles, and secrets whispered from ancient pages, join the Guild of Storybound Explorers. Subscribe now and ring the bell to unlock every new quest the moment it drops. The next chapter awaits. Will you answer the call?